Hello and welcome to episode 28.5. I thought I'd just give you an explanation of exactly what I'm doing with this custom body kit, the materials that I'm using, the procedure and reasons why I'm using certain things, not others, and generally the design layout. So why don't we start with why I'm using certain materials. The reason I'm using 10mm and 6mm MDF is it's really easy to form. You can get nice edges on it, it holds its own, and it's just basically really quick and easy to use. The design that I'm going for obviously is like a modern day WRC car. A few people have asked why I'm not using foam, expanding foam. I find it's really messy to work with, and it's actually harder because if you want really straight angles, it's easier to actually start with some hard base where you can actually just apply filler, a lot less of it, and get the sort of look you want. It's also kind of counterintuitive because you need to apply so much filler on top of the foam so it doesn't crack when you come to sanding it down and getting it shaped how you want. So you may as well start with a cheaper filler, which I'll go into a second, and then obviously body filler, a good layer of that to get the final finish. So why don't we move on to what I am actually using as filler on the car. Originally what I used was a filling compound. Now this can be purchased from any sort of DIY store. I get it from Toolstation. However, this pre-mixed stuff is way too wet, and basically in the temperatures that I'm working in, it's just no good. So I'll just, obviously it's bright white, it's really wet, and it doesn't hold its own. I don't know if you saw in the last episode, but I actually used it on the quarter panel there, and you can actually see it just kind of falling under its own weight down the side of the panels. But an alternative is using, again, it's a plasterboard adhesive, so it's not automotive, but it's more building orientated. But the benefit is with this one is it's fast drying. It says 60 minutes, but really in reality the thickness I'm using it's more like a day or two to really get dry. But this is mix it yourself, so it comes in a powder form, so you can mix it really dry if you want to go off a bit quicker. Obviously if you're doing smoothing and more detailed areas, then like that for example, then you can mix it a bit wetter. A really big part of why I'm using plasterboard adhesive is purely the cost. So if we do a little math, I can tell you the amount of money that you can save rather than using an easy sand filler or any other car filler by using the plasterboard adhesive. So if I've used 45 kilos approximately of that adhesive, they come in bags of 10 kilos, so that's 4.5 bags, and that's at £7 a bag, and that's British pounds. So if I times 7 by 4.5, it's 31, I think it's 31.50. So I've spent £31.50. If I had used Easy Sand body filler, which is the only filler that I use because it's easy to sand, the green stuff you get from places like Halfords is nigh impossible to get any adhesion on to get the thick stuff back off it. So if I had used that, I think for 3 litres, so if we call that 3 kilos, is £23 per bag, per container. So if I had to have used the filler instead of the mix yourself bags of plasterboard filler, we're looking at 45 divided by 3, so obviously 15 of them. So 15 times 23, because they're £23 each, is £345. So I've already saved over £300 by using this adhesive and not using that as the base filler. And another thing to note about this plasterboard adhesive is that it's really, really easy to sand. So if you want to take a large amount off, if you put loads, you don't have to worry about putting loads on basically, because you can take it off pretty quickly, and it does hold its own. And unlike a lot of adhesives that are pre-mixed, it doesn't actually crack. The shrinkage isn't actually too bad. So when I say it holds its own, if you go sort of over vertical on the side of the panel, it actually doesn't move. I may as well show you the car in its current state. So all the filler is on the front, ready to sand down. It still needs to dry out completely. So I've built the bottom part of the front bumper up. The flares on the top of the wings are probably going to be slightly smaller in actual fact, but I quite like the gradient of the bumper. It kind of slopes down around the edges and follows the light line slightly better. I generally film less on this side of the car, but it's very similar to the other side, obviously, with just basically getting all the material on that I need to wait for it to dry completely so I can sand it down nice and smooth. If anyone is unsure on the process of making DIY panels out of fiberglass, I'll just quickly run through it. So at the moment I've got obviously the base layer on the car of filler, and I'm just waiting for it to dry completely, so then I can it'll turn white when it's dry. Then I can sand it fully, get a nice finish, and just make it undersized to what I want it, because obviously I'm putting car filler, the U-Pole Easy Sand filler, on top to get the final layer, which I'll pull the molds from. I need to put a decent layer on, but it's basically just get a really nice finish, get all the dimensions exactly how I want it, in ready for making the fiberglass molds. The molding process will be, each part of the car will be fiberglassed directly onto, after putting a release agent on the car. So that is essentially the plugs, the molds for the panels that I will make. So once the fiberglass is applied and all the areas, basically I'll do it in sections. So the rear quarter will actually be the largest one, so it will run all the way from the back. Obviously this part will all be one, as well as the duct, and then it will probably be cut off at about there, sort of the bottom of the door line. So that's where the join will be between the panels when they're complete. Once I've obviously put fiberglass on the car, I can pull it off as one, so it would be an inverted feature of the car, if you like, so the shape will be completely inverted. And then once that is cleaned up and finished off, so any imperfections in the car, so if there's like small holes, or there probably won't be, but if there are, I can actually touch them up in reverse on the inside of the mold, because I can put fiberglass resin or filler or anything in there that I need to make the actual panel from. So the inverted panel mold that I take off from the car will then be built onto with obviously fresh fiberglass, which will be the actual panels themselves. This process will obviously have to be repeated either side of the rear quarters, the side skirts, and the wings, which will probably be cut or joined, around there at kind of the smallest point. So the biggest and probably the hardest section of the whole car will be the front bumper, because it will wrap right around up to about here. So obviously there's a lot of fiberglass work to do once I've got this filler section over, but once I've done that, it means I can probably pull 2 or 3 panels from each mold before the molds break, so I'll have spares for the car. Quickly run through the back. The reason I've built up this back part so much is I'm having a shroud on the Perspex rear screen, or the polycarbonate screen, and that will obviously dictate how high I'm going to have the rear quarters. So soon one of the things I will be doing is obviously getting the rear window sorted out to obviously make the mountings for the spoiler. And whilst you're on the spoiler, obviously it's a 4-part spoiler. You've seen the well, you haven't seen it all, but the development so far of the rear wing. That is just a shape to make a plug from, so it can be lightweight fiberglass, sort of GRP, hopefully have some kind of flex in it as well, and be super strong for using on the road. As you can probably understand, this part of the build is actually taking quite a lot of time, unexpectedly, mainly because of the weather, a few other things as well, but it's basically a long process to get the layers on, to get it dry enough to then move on to the next part. The methods and the procedures I'm using are kind of strange, if you like. Basically it's a budget build, so I'm doing everything I can to keep it as cheap as possible. So that's why it's kind of a bit controversial, some of the things I'm doing, but hopefully this has explained a bit more then you have a better understanding of sort of where it's going to go from here. So the aesthetics of it is completely bespoke. It's my own design. I obviously have had inspiration from other cars, but it is sort of a unique design, so it's a one-off in the way it will look. By all means, if you have any more questions, if you do have any more questions, just put them in the comment section. Me and Tom are really enjoying reading them and responding to them the best we can. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done already.